Hi, I'm Eric Vanman. I'm a social neuroscientist at the University of Queensland, associate professor in psychology, and I recently celebrated my 60th birthday. Yes, me, I'm 60. I can't believe I'm 60. I can't believe I'm not 20 still. It's one of those weird things where I think just it's amazing how time flies by and you don't really feel that you're aging that quickly, but like apparently it's not been that quickly. It's been 40 something years since I was 20. And I just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about what it was like to have my birthday and what's going on with me being 60. I'm currently sitting outside in our backyard and you can hear the birds here. This is the Australian winter. And it's a pretty noisy time of the day at the end of the day when all the birds come in these woods that are behind me. And every once in a while a kangaroo might hop by behind me here. If that happens, that'd be great. I can't really do them on cue, but sometimes they hop on their way to someplace to eat around this time of day. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just have 4 main sections to this video. First, I'm gonna talk about how did I get here? Then I'm gonna talk about how it feels to be 60. Then I'm gonna talk about what's next. And finally, I have a few questions from my subscribers that I said that I would address. So I wanna go ahead and address those questions as well. All right, let's take the first question. How did I get here? Well, as you might know, and I think you can probably tell from my accent, is that I'm an American. I was born in the United States. I'm actually from the state of Minnesota is where I was born. And I grew up in Minnesota and Illinois. And I went to the University of Iowa, which is close by Illinois, for my undergraduate. Then I went off to California for my Ph.D. There were 4 kids in my family. My father has passed away, and so has my sister. I was the eldest. I still have 2 brothers and my mother. And as growing up, it was, a pretty normal childhood for me. My parents did get divorced when I was 12 years old, and they remarried a few years later after my mother had married somebody else, and then that marriage had fallen apart, and then she remarried my dad, and then my parents divorced again, and my parents then each married other people. But most of this didn't hit me until I was about 13, 14, and I don't think that it really had that much of an effect on me in the sense of having disrupted my childhood very much as I think it did to my younger siblings. But that's just one of those things that life throws at you. I've learned how to deal with that. Probably the one thing I could say that comes from having a family like I've had is that you become sort of a peacemaker. I've had way too much, probably times where I needed to make the peace between my 2 parents who were arguing and bickering, and my gosh, I had them at my wedding, both of my weddings in fact, and it's just one of those things that probably makes me who I am today, that I'm somebody who doesn't really like conflict very much and tries to seek out peace among the people in my family. Now, you might wonder, what was I like as a kid in terms of science and that kind of stuff? I was pretty scientifically oriented. I collected lots of different things. I collected stamps, I collected rocks, and even won a trophy for my rock collection. Did different kinds of science fairs and that kind of stuff. And when I was probably 14, 15 years old, I actually thought I was going to be an aeronautics engineer. Yeah, that I was going to go to Boeing and design some sort of vehicle that could go faster than the speed of light so we could go off to the different stars. I was into science fiction and flight and that kind of thing. But funnily enough, after Star Wars came out, right around that time in 1978, I changed my mind. I decided I wanted to go into psychology, and I think it's because my mother was getting the magazine Psychology Today, and I was reading Psychology Today on a regular basis, thought psychology seemed much more interesting and fascinating. And so I intended to go off to my university education and become a psychologist / psychiatrist. And so I thought I could do both pre-medicine and get a PhD in psychology, and I would end up being a psychiatrist and a clinical PhD, a clinical psychologist with a PhD. As by the time I got to university, I decided that I didn't really have what it took to study chemistry and biology and physics. There was a certain amount of discipline that was required to really memorize and learn the things for those topics to do the pre-medicine kind of curriculum they have in the US, and I just didn't have it in me, and I knew that that wasn't going to be me, so I dropped the pre-med part and just went into psychology 100%. So when I finished my undergraduate degree at the University of Iowa, I then went to California, to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and that's where I got my Ph.D. And my Ph.D. was concentrated on using psychophysiological measures, social psychology, experimental psychology, and it wasn't called neuroscience yet, but I started doing social neuroscience and neuroscience-like topics near the end of my Ph.D. One thing you should probably know about me is I'm incredibly slow. It took me 5.5 years to do my undergraduate degree. It took me another 6 to 7 to do my PhD, so I'm pretty slow when it comes to finishing these things, probably because I get easily interested in lots of different things and want to do all of them at the same time. One of my weaknesses is that I'm not a highly focused person on just one topic, one subject. I have to be kind of interested in lots of things at the same time. This is the way I read books as well. I have probably at any given time 6 or 7 books that I'm currently reading. I read a little bit here, a little bit there. I just really have a hard time staying focused on one thing for very long. It sounds like it's ADHD or something, but I don't think I actually have that. I think it's just I'm somebody who just needs to be stimulated in lots of different ways intellectually, and so there's just that's probably what underlies all of that. Anyway, I finished my PhD at the University of Southern California, and in the meantime I had started dating and then ended up marrying one of the other students in our program, and we were married for several years, and we then moved to Atlanta, and in Atlanta I was at Emory University for a couple years, and I went to Georgia State University. We ended up getting a divorce in 2001, 2002, right around that time. For various reasons. We're still actually quite good friends. It was an amicable divorce. And then a year later, I met my current wife, and we married in 2003. So it was actually 20 years ago this week that we had our wedding, and it was in England. And so one thing that I did this week is I not only celebrated my 60th birthday, but I also celebrated my 20th wedding anniversary. Now you can imagine that means that I was 40 when I got married, and I still hadn't had a child yet, and I was very much interested in having a kid. And luckily my wife that I ended up marrying then also wanted to have a kid. And so it was just a couple of years later that we finally had my child, my son. And I've only had the one son, and it's just been really great. I've loved fatherhood, and what else can I say about that right now? I'll just say, though, that I was at Georgia State University as an assistant professor. Then I got promoted to associate professor, and I eventually had to leave Georgia State because I was worried, first of all, that I might not get tenure because it looked like they were trying to get rid of social psychology as a program, and they had already gotten rid of one of my friends, somebody else had been axed in terms of not getting tenure. I thought as a backup I should just go ahead and apply somewhere else. So I ended up applying here to the University of Queensland as a backup. But when I ended up getting the job offer and coming out and visiting, I loved it so much that I just went ahead and told Georgia State that I didn't want to stay there any longer, and they had just given me tenure and promoted me to associate professor. So that's a big thing. I felt underappreciated and felt threatened about my job there. And it basically forced me to leave and ended up making me move all the way across the world here to Australia. And you might say, well, why didn't you just stay in the United States and get a job somewhere else there? I did apply for a couple places in the United States, but it was kind of hard at that point trying to get a mid-career job. And besides, Australia, it just seemed really brilliant to come to a really top research university and have the kinds of things I didn't have when I was at Georgia State. So we happily moved here in 2007, and I've just really had a great time ever since. So that's how I ended up where I am now. And I hope that kind of gives you a sense of who I am and where I've been in my life. And by the way, I should also just mention, if you're interested in some of these issues about how I ended up doing my undergraduate and my PhD, I do have this video up here on mentoring. And in that one, I talk about how important it is to have a mentor, but I also talk about my own personal mentors, and it gives you a little bit more insight on some of the people who influenced my life at that time. So let's move on to the second part of this video, which is, how does it feel to be 60? This is a funny question that kept coming up at my birthday party. People would say to me, how does it feel to be 60? And now I've only been 60 for 24 hours, so I hadn't really felt that different. It's now been a week since I had my 60th birthday. And how do I feel about being 60, or how does it feel to be 60? It's one of those strange things where I feel like my body is definitely getting old. You can feel it as you age, and it's sort of a sad thing to see. I mean, I know I don't keep myself in the best of shape, and I'm not like somebody who always eats the right thing and does a lot of exercise. So I'm partly responsible for the fact that I don't feel 100% all the time. But also, your body starts to wear down as you get older. And one of the things that went first was my eyesight, and I have to wear glasses now. I can tell my hearing is starting to go a little bit. Mentally, well, the only thing mentally that's happening to me is probably it's a little bit harder sometimes to remember things. Like I just have, every once in a while, I just can't remember someone's name, or can't remember what it is that I was about to do. Just little teeny memory lapses like that. You know, you probably have heard people make that joke, a senior moment. That the senior moment kind of thing is happening more and more often. Otherwise, though, emotionally and psychologically, and in terms of like joy of living, I feel just as great as I've always felt. I still feel like that guy who was in that 20-year-old body and had exciting ideas about what he was going to do with his life. I still feel that way today. And so even though I'm 60, I kind of am sad about the fact that my body is getting older and that I'm getting closer and closer to the end of my life. I also am mentally just feel really happy and really glad that I get to live during these particular times, these exciting times that we are all facing right now. There's so many interesting things going on in technology. There's all of these problems that we're going to face with climate and everything else that I hope that I can contribute to in the next few decades that I have left here. But that's all I can say right now. I guess I'm just really excited about being 60. And that leads me to my next question then. What's next? Now, in the United States and in Australia, there isn't any sort of mandatory retirement as there are in some places in Europe. So I've never really thought about retiring at 60 or 65 or whatever. If I want to retire, I think I can retire when I'm 67 or 68 now in Australia, and I will actually have access to all of the privileges that you'd have when you retire. But I don't actually plan to retire until I'm at least 70. So I probably have at least 10 more years of my academic career going on. And when I think about that, the main thing I'm probably going to do are things that I just find personally really interesting. Things that I think could have perhaps a meaningful impact on society. It's not that I have to worry as much as I did when I was younger about, you know, what things would get me grants or what things will get me publications. I'm probably going to be more motivated once I'm promoted to full professor, which, by the way, that's another video here. I'm working on my full professorship this year as well. So maybe by December, I'll know that I'm a full professor or not. But once I am promoted to full professor, I think one of the things I'm going to do is just focus more on things that I just truly find interesting, and rather than being driven by external rewards, it's going to be much more intrinsically oriented. I mean, I'm already like that now, to tell you the truth. Most of the things that I do and the way I spend my life is mostly I'm interested in things that make me happy. For instance, doing this YouTube channel and talking to people all over the world and talking to students who might be studying psychology or interested in it, that gives me so much more joy than almost anything else. I'm also still really fascinated with my field in psychology and want to make some really very important contributions if I can before I finally retire. I'm not going to be somebody who works until he's 80, 85, like my advisor Norman Miller was. I can see myself getting around 70 and maybe backing off, maybe doing some YouTube videos, but largely doing reading and just enjoying life and gardening and travel. I'm still very much into travel, as you probably can pick up across my videos. I traveled a lot during my career. It's one of the perks about being a professor, being an academic, is you get to go be on sabbatical, you get to go to conferences in different places in the world. And I've been doing that now for a long time, and I want to continue doing it. And now that we're kind of past most of the worst parts of COVID, I'm hoping to resume some of that travel in the coming years. So that's the other big thing, that's what's next. So 3 of my subscribers wrote in and asked me some questions for my birthday, so I thought I'd go ahead and address them. First of all, I have Ashfaq Khan, 2172, who wrote, "Happy birthday. My question is somewhat like this. Could you please share with us about your adolescent life and how you spend it? And if you can, share something with us about your family. Thanks." Now, I've already mentioned to you about my family, what that was like in terms of we went through divorce and remarriage and all that kind of stuff, and I had my 3 younger siblings. In terms of my adolescence, I was a good student. I did always have a part-time job. I either was being a newspaper delivery boy. I actually would get up early in the morning or do late in the afternoon deliveries. I started working when I was 15 in a delicatessen ice cream shop. So my adolescence was full of jobs, doing lots of different coursework and being very, very active in my extracurriculars. I was in theater, I was in the science club, I played chess, I was in the ham radio club, I was in the band. Oh, I did everything you possibly could. You see, as I mentioned to you earlier, I have this problem that I get really interested in lots of different things, and I just thrived in high school with all of its extracurricular activities. And so I did everything I possibly could, given the limited amount of time. I even was on the debate team and enjoyed that for a while. So that's what my adolescence was like. Legal Eagle 4947 says, happy 60th birthday, celebrations, Eric. If you were given the chance to live your life again, would you choose a different career the second time around? If so, what would it be and why? If not, why not? Assuming you had all the insight of your life the first time around. Very interesting question. I thought a lot about that, that whole thing about if I could do something over again, would I take a different fork in the road, that kind of thing. I can't honestly say that I've actually done anything that I really regret in terms of a decision. If I were going to do it all over again, I just wish I had been more serious about doing research at a younger age. It turns out that psychology really cares about research, and I would just wish I had done more research at a younger age, because I think that would be really important to have had a better track record when I was in my 20s. But in terms of careers, the only other thing I can think of that I probably would have enjoyed doing instead of psychology was probably history. And I'm still very much interested in history. I took history when I was an undergraduate, had some excellent history professors. And so I could have seen myself also have gone into history. But I think largely I would have stayed with psychology and neuroscience and just been a more productive researcher at a younger age than I was. And finally, Tuzia 2085 wrote, happy upcoming birthday, Eric. My question to you, now that you're 60, what do you prioritize or focus on the most? And has that been different in your 40s and 50s? I have to say probably the main thing that age has brought me is a bit more being less hot-headed. And I tend to not get myself so stressful and so negative as I used to be. I used to let things get me upset and angry, and then I wouldn't express it very well, and maybe somebody eventually would find out I was angry. But I've just found now that I'm just much calmer about most things when I'm stressed out. I have that kind of feeling it's all going to work out anyway. This is just a small matter that I won't remember. There's only a couple times in my entire life that I can still remember being really angry, and those times, that there was something that was really worth the anger at the time. And one of those times, I still sort of regret the way I handled it. And I'll just tell you, I'll share with you right here where it was. The day that I went to go see my dean at Georgia State University to tell her that I was leaving to come to Australia, my intention was to go and talk to her and ask her if she could help me out with my students. Could I still help my Ph.D. students that were left behind? And instead, I ended up using the opportunity to get really mad at her about the way that she had handled my particular position there and how I had to keep helping out my colleagues with different issues that they had, and they were getting paid better than me. And I just really had all this anger built up over the last few years while I was at Georgia State, and I just sort of let it all out in that meeting, and I ended up getting nothing from her. We just ended up just being really angry with each other, and I walked out and didn't get one concession, anything that I wanted when I was leaving Georgia State. And it's probably because I just let my pent-up anger get to me. And I still regret that to this day. I mean, gosh, it was 16 years ago, and I can still feel that anger when I think about it. I just wish I had stayed cooler about it. I mean, I was leaving, I was in a good position. Why did I go ahead and let my anger get to me that way? I don't think that would happen to me today. I think I'm a much calmer person. And so my focus is to try to, stay more content and more happy and not let the little things get to me as much as they used to. And I'll say one last thing, which is that I probably have said yes to too many things and too many people and helped out too many people over the decades to the extent that it had a problem that affected me. And I need to say no more often and kind of watch out for myself. So that's my other focus, is that I'm going to try to be less willing to do something to help somebody else at the expense of my own well-being. And so I'm hoping to keep that as my focus now in my 60s, is to kind of watch out for myself more than I have in the past. Sounds a little selfish, but see, that's the thing. I feel a little guilty even just saying to you here on camera that I plan to be more of a person who's going to say no in the future. What can I say? All right, so I want to end this video here. I thank you so much for watching it. People who are on YouTube watching my videos, I probably have a core audience of about 100 or 200 people at this point. I really appreciate you watching my videos, leaving me comments, going onto my community posts and posting there. It really makes me feel good to know there's people out there in the world who are feeling that my videos are helping them somehow, maybe to entertain them or to teach them about psychology or neuroscience or whatever it is. So I really do appreciate you being there. And I hope that you'll leave a message or comment on this video. I'd like to hear from more of you out there. If you've never commented before and you're a subscriber, please think about commenting at least on this video as a little birthday gift. Just say hello to me so that I know you're there. And this is it for this video, and hopefully the next video will be more of a normal kind of content video, but that's it for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.